So I did not make it on my first attempt. I passed out in the pool and they had to revive me. And then that was probably really a good thing that it happened. But I went from there and was able to get to a sniper platoon and spend some time there learning a lot and then learn to swim. And then a few years later, had the opportunity to try out again.
Welcome to Mindset Lessons from the Field. I'm Gina Casazza, the author of Training with a SEAL. If you haven't known by now, I did start posting the chapters to my memoir that you guys can read on the Substack. So I stopped saying upcoming author and now just going with author. I am really excited for today's guest, who is also an author, by the way. He is a Marine who joined at just 17, rose through the ranks of Force Recon, and helped lead one of the most elite war-fighting units in America, Detachment 1. During some of the most volatile years in the global war on terror, his 20-year career took him from sniper to team leader, from Afghanistan to Iraq, and ultimately to shaping the modern Marines Raiders. He's also the author of Tough, Rugged Bastards, a memoir that takes us inside the creation, training, and combat deployment of this historic unit. I am so excited. Ladies and gentlemen, without further introduction, John Dailey. John, thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, Gina, thank you for having me. And I do have to make a disclaimer that anything I say is my own opinion, and it doesn't reflect the Marine Corps United States Special Operations Command.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that I feel like I should start saying things like that too. This is important. I want to dive right in because as I mentioned in the bio, 17, joined instantly. Now, you must have known, like, hey, I wanted to be a Marine, right? Or something. I don't know. What made you choose Marines in the first place? Why don't we start there, and then I'll ask my next question.
Certainly. I decided on Marine, kind of a roundabout story, but at a very young age. I was 7 years old. It was our bicentennial, so you can kind of do the math, figure out how old. But I was big, I'd come from a small town in Virginia, big parade, for the bicentennial, 4th of July. During that, I saw a Marine come through in his uniform. And, I remember, I'm sure, absolutely very differently than it actually happened. I've talked to my dad. He doesn't remember it happening at all. But I told him at that point that, or at least in my memory, that I'm going to join the Marine Corps. And then I, went to the library, got books, and just tried to read up as much as I could on Marine Corps history. And I had other, vocations in mind. I wanted to be a baseball player. I wanted to be a truck driver, the president, all of the usual suspects. But I always kept coming back to Marine. But then the movie Rambo came out, and of course that, changed everything. And so he was Army Special Operations, Green Beret. So I wanted to do that as that was kind of in my high school early high school years. And I went to the recruiter's office, and they shared a little strip mall location, and the Army recruiter wasn't in. He was at lunch or whatever, and the Marine recruiter was. So I went and talked to him, and he let me know that the Marine Corps had a organization, a unit similar in kind of in scope to what the Green Berets did, and that was Force Recon. So I said, all right, sign me up.
It's funny because you're not the first person on this show that has said, I want to go this branch, and then they just weren't there. They weren't there that day, and there I ended up. No, this one. Now, so you went, is there a pipeline in terms of Special Forces Marine that you went through? Like, what was it exactly for you in terms of training-wise?
Yeah, no, there wasn't at the time. Now there is. But I went through boot camp. I went through infantry training. And while I was in infantry training, we were given the opportunity to try out for recon. And unfortunately, I couldn't swim. I thought I could. So I had grown up, like I said, in the country, like jumping into lakes and ponds, and could get from one side to the other without drowning. When I showed up there, they're like, hey, cross stroke, side stroke, all these strokes that I did not know. So I did not make it on my first attempt. I passed out in the pool, and they had to revive me. And then that was probably really a good thing that it happened. But I went from there and was able to get into a sniper platoon, spend some time there learning a lot, and then learn to swim. And then a few years later, had the opportunity to try out again.
So let's talk about that. That's really interesting. So did you, when you didn't make it, right, because of the swimming portion, was it still like, I still want this opportunity again? Did you know? Because sometimes you don't know that you're going to get another opportunity. And then if you did or didn't, like, were you practicing the swim like throughout that time?
I absolutely knew I wanted to try again, and I hoped that I would get another opportunity. In one of the Marine Corps is a amphibious organization, right? But it's kind of hard to believe that it's challenging to find a pool sometimes, where you're stationed, or one that's open, during the hours that you have, and then finding somebody to help you learn to swim. I did practice as much as I could. I got help. I had another opportunity to try out, and I didn't take it because I didn't think that my swimming was where it needed to be. But then, finally, a couple of years later, the opportunity came around again. This time, I wasn't going to let anything stand in my way.
And how was that time around?
I'm still not a great swimmer. Not when it comes to speed and strokes and things of that nature, but I can stay afloat, and I can, meet, the requirements that they have. So I will, just had kind of set my mind that I will drown in this pool when they're going to have to pull me out before I give up or quit.
Wow. That's always just a fear of mine. Actually, I did this special forces, I forgot what I called it, challenge, and it was like every single day for July of last year. A bunch of my guests like submitted things for me, challenges for me, and one of them was a former Navy SEAL who was like the 50-meter swim, and I was just like, and then like another person was like, that's not like, you need somebody with you. Like you could die. And I'm like, like that's, I was just like, oh my God. But it's just, you don't realize. And then for yourself though, when you did get resuscitated, was there like a little bit of a fear to go back in, or was it like, oh, they're going to revive me again?
You don't, when you pass out underwater, you stop breathing. Your body has it's called a mammalian diving reflex. So you stop and you kind of shut down. And then when you come to the surface, you start breathing again. So I wasn't resuscitated. It wasn't quite that severe. I've heard people say different things, but it's really not unpeaceful. Your vision starts to collapse into a black tunnel. And then it finally just closes. So it's not recommended. I'm not recommending anybody go and do that. But I had the distinct pleasure of it's called a shallow water blackout, of having that happen to me on more than one occasion in dive school and things later on. But
so you went did you find dive school super challenging as someone that's not really a strong swimmer?
I didn't. And when I say I'm not a strong swimmer, I'm not one of the fastest guys doing a crawl stroke or doing a butterfly or something like that. But yeah, I have no fear of the water. I say that cautiously because everybody can be made to be afraid of the water. We call it the great equalizer sometimes. But, I would confidently jump in the ocean and, go for a 10-mile swim. It wouldn't be fast. It wouldn't be pretty, but I would get there.
I'm curious as Marine, I think we've had 2 Marines on the show. One transitioned to be a Navy SEAL. One was a Marine, I believe, a reconnaissance Marine. And for you as a Marine, it's a different branch, the Marines, as opposed to the other branches. And I want to know, when you first got in at 17, was it a cultural shock for you, or for someone that has like studied and knew you wanted to go that route? Was it not? And was there stuff that you learned about yourself when you first went in that kind of like, that was just new, like something that you learned about who you are,
Yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely a culture shock. I mean, regardless, I think, of the age that you go in, I think it's probably going in early is a good thing, because you haven't experienced, or at least I hadn't. I grew up in a very small town in a relatively sheltered environment in the grand scheme of things. The the other recruits that came in with me that, come from cities and things like that. They had a much broader kind of view of life, I think. But for me, I was accustomed to working hard. I was accustomed to being told what to do. I was accustomed to saying, yes, sir. So it's absolutely a culture shock. I mean, the Marine Corps makes it a culture shock, and that's kind of part of the myth and like legend of the Marine Corps. Everything, the names for everything change, so the bathroom isn't the bathroom, it's the head. The left is port and right is starboard, and everything, the whole vocabulary changes. So you are really, it's like being resurrected as kind of like a new person. And I loved it. I loved everything about it. So I found I spent all of high school really preparing, playing sports, working out, doing all the things except swimming, learning swimming, obviously. So I didn't find boot camp particularly physically challenging. I think I got slower because I was spending a lot of time running cross country, running track. So I feel like I slowed down a little bit. I certainly put on some weight because I was a tiny guy. Though it's the second part of the question was something I learned about myself, I think.
Yeah, like I remember when I was in the Navy SEAL prep program and Coach Mack was like, you don't work this hard and not find out who you are. And you'll find out if you are someone that is a person of their word, someone that lies to themselves, someone that, is negative, and you learn a lot about yourself. Was there something that you learned about yourself in the beginning that was like kind of,
Yeah, I had the ability, I learned to kind of see the humorous side of a very unhumorous situation. And that credit curiosity, imagination, and kind of sense of humor with most of the success that I've had in my life. And with pretty thought out reasons for that. But if you can't, boot camp is so, comical, like that if you either have to like laugh or cry. I kind of chose to laugh, which got me in trouble a lot, which meant that I'd have to do a lot more push-ups, which meant that I got a lot stronger than everybody else because I was always up on what they call the quarterdeck, doing extra push-ups. But being able to see the kind of behind the curtain a little bit, you kind of realize that the drill instructors don't hate your guts, right? They're doing a job, and their job is to make you into a Marine. So when you realize that, it kind of makes some of the things funny. And it also, I think, allows you to recognize that, hey, this guy's looking out for my best interest. He's doing everything that he can to, and part of it is, screaming in my face because that's.
When did you recognize that? Because that's not something easy to recognize. Was it like later on in your career when you look back at it, or was it like at some point in that moment you realized that it wasn't like an intentional, like, I hate you?
Yeah, it was early on in while I was in boot camp. And I think that absolutely helped me get through it, I think, without some of the scars that other people talk about having. Because it, I don't know, it's just, I had on x-ray glasses, kind of saw, behind the scenes a little bit. One of the very early days, the first day that the drill instructors meet you, they come in and they tear everything, your beds and your foot lockers, they throw them upside down. They're just sitting there screaming. It's wild, and it's meant to like shock and awe. The recruit who is standing, and we're in two lines on either side of this long squad bay, they call it. The guy right across from me, he's got a weird look on his face. I'm like trying to keep a straight face myself because I'm kind of wanting to laugh at him. And then I look down and realize that he's pissed his pants. And so he's standing in a puddle of piss. And so I start laughing. I start laughing right as the drill instructor's about right here. So he starts screaming at me, like spit on my face. And he's like, what the hell's so funny? I was like, and you have to call yourself this recruit and that recruit. And I'm like, that recruit across from this recruit pissed himself. And so he turns like, oh my God. So then he goes, and that guy draws his anger. So he goes and yells at him for a while, but then he comes back. He's like, hey, still yelling at me. He's like, you think it's so funny? You get to clean it up. So I've got to take these towels, and I'm like sopping up this other guy's piss. Then I have to go clean the towels in the laundry room or the bathroom. There's a deep sink. And so I'm in there. There's another recruit from another platoon. I'm laughing my ass off telling him about it. And then suddenly it's one of those movie things where he stops laughing, and I'm like, he's behind me, isn't he? And the drill instructor's behind me. So then, he proceeded to, I was doing push-ups for the rest of the day. But for a second, like I caught a glimpse of a smile on his face. And that kind of, I think, is what I was like, you know what? This is a game, right? You have to learn to play the game.
You have to learn to play the game, yeah. Wow, that is interesting. That's great that you were able to observe that and see that, which I'm sure changed the rest of everything for you. And being able to see things, I guess, through a funny, comical, like curiosity, all that lens. That is a great takeaway for our listeners, because sometimes we don't lean on that. We don't lean on the curiosity. We don't lean on the funny, especially in those dark times. This is really great advice there. Yeah. Actually, I'm curious, speaking of mindset and things like that, you've operated in serious, dangerous environments, right? Is there like a mental skill that civilians can learn from special ops training, or something that you learned to help you thrive under pressure? Like, was there something that I get it with the Marines, because they're like always screaming in your face, right? So it's like you were having to do things. Is that the whole point of it? Like them screaming to help you thrive under pressure? And how did was there like something that you did that helped you to not be like, I don't know.
Yeah, in boot camp, then that's after you get out of boot camp, people don't routinely scream at you. But during,
And how long is boot camp, by the way?
It's maybe like 2 months or 13 weeks. I'm not sure. It's been a long time. And I think it's changed length, but I think it was somewhere around 12 or 13 weeks. I mean, at boot camp, the seeing the funny side of it was, enough to help me. But, after that, when you really start, and that's the reason they do it, they want to put you under as great a degree of stress as possible, because the whole idea of it is that during that time that you're in boot camp, that 8 or 12 weeks, whatever it is, that you're kind of reborn, right? You're not the person that you were when you came in. I mean, you came in as a 17-year-old kid. You finish as a United States Marine. I mean, it almost makes me tear up. It's kind of a big deal,
Yeah, that really is. And what would you say? How did the military change you, in a sense, or at least within those 2 months? Like, what is all of a sudden the person that you've become, or you became? I'm sure it's evolved over time, but just initially.
Yeah, initially I had spent like my entire high school, 4 years, trying to do everything that I thought Marines did, spending a lot of time with as much time as possible with the recruiter, and trying to learn as much. So I had felt that I had started kind of molding myself into what I thought a Marine should be. They just change you, completely, from one thing to another. And so by the time you graduate, one of the things I think they said is that the idea is that they will kind of bend you like a tree, like so far, one way that you'll never go back to being the civilian that you were. You'll always, have this, certain Marineness about you. And I think that's unique within the Marine Corps of the services that I've dealt with. There are a lot of great people, a lot of people who spent, lots of time in the military. I think Marines have a harder time getting out and not thinking of themselves as Marines than most other services do. I think it's been described as a little bit of a cult,
That's interesting. Yeah, my uncle was a Marine, and it was funny though. He went in with 4 friends, like him and 3 friends. So him and 3 friends, but 2 of them went ahead of him. And they saw each other at boot camp, and 2 of his friends just went AWOL. They were like, "Get out of here! Get out of here! This is terrible." And my uncle and his friend that went in at the same time, I mean, they loved it. Like they thought, but it's definitely different. I will say a lot of the guys that come onto the show have mentioned, like, when they talk about like who they want on their team, everybody's like, "I'll take a Marine any day." They're just, it's just a different. And I find that really interesting. What do you think that makes a Marine, I guess, in a way, like a Marine, where like people would say, like, "I'll take you guys like any day." Like I remember a bunch of Navy SEALs were mentioning that on the show before. They've said like, why do you think that is? And what is it that makes you guys different than another branch?
I think, and in my book, I spend like a chapter kind of talking about this, trying to really dig into it, because the Marine Corps has always been great at recruiting, right? Because we don't really let the truth get in the way of a good story. So since the dawn of the Marine Corps, we've kind of made up these legends about ourselves and then like tried to live up to them. The name, the Submarine's nickname is Devil Dog, and the story is that name was given to us by the German soldiers in World War One, who were so afraid of the Marines. They're like, these are hellhounds, right? So they call it Teufelhunden, which is kind of turned into Devil Dog. That probably never happened. There's just all of these stories throughout history. So we create almost impossible hurdle for ourselves to jump, and then we manage to jump it. We think service wise, we're also kind of the bastard stepchildren. We're a part of the Navy, the Department of the Navy. We generally have less money, less resources, less things, less nice accommodations, and that makes us pissed off most of the time and ready to fight. So there's kind of a lot that goes into it, but it's pretty well crafted. The whole Marine persona, the whole time that you're in training is crafted to turn you into something. And once you become that thing, then you can't, at least in my case, and you can't imagine going back or being anything else.
That's really interesting. And I read a couple of your newsletters and stuff, and I wanted to ask you a couple of questions based off of that as well. That I found really interesting. The one about digging your corner that you wrote about. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to know how, and by the way, I might put some of these in the show notes. So that way like people can check it out or sign up with your newsletter. But how can that principle help someone stay focused in a world filled with distractions? This question's mainly for me.
Yeah, it's so the concept of digging your corner comes from close quarter battle. When you and another man or another Marine, whatever the case is, enter a room where there may or may not be bad guys with guns. The role of the first person and the second person in the room is to go to opposite corners and make sure that those corners are clear, because there's probably another one or two possibly Marines coming in behind you, and they have a sector. So it really is about, recognizing that if you don't do the thing that you're responsible for, you have the potential to, risk other people's lives. You have the potential to create a situation where, things start going downhill rapidly. And it's hard, when you come through the door and you see someone, you may not see a gun in their hands, but you don't know that there's not a gun in their hands. But you've got to pull your head away and make sure that you do your the thing that you're responsible for, because other people are counting on you. So that's kind of the point that I was trying to get at in in that article, is that, we've got to, focus on the main thing, keep the main thing. And I found that to be helpful to me, because I have a tendency to be like a squirrel at times.
Yeah, I find myself like I'm in the middle of doing something, and then I think about something and I go do that without finishing the other thing. And then I have to stop myself, because then I'll go to the next thing, and then 3 things don't get finished. And I'm like, no. One thing, it's going to lead to another thing, and I found that really interesting. And I wanted to get into, because in the beginning of the show, it talked about how in the intro, we talked about, you being a team leader and stuff. And one of the questions that I thought I was really curious about for yourself is, because you and what you've done, trust is like life or death. Like, you are trusting somebody. It's survival, really, essentially. And what is the fastest way to build trust within a new team?
I feel like doing, and that's kind of the certainly the Marine Corps way, the special operations way, is putting them in a situation where they have to trust each other, doing hard things together, sharing. I mean, you quickly will see, even going out on a training patrol together, you'll see is somebody saying, hey, let me take some more of the weight. Let me do this. I'll stay up on watch. I'll do this. And you quickly see that, I can count on this guy. And you you quickly build the trust, and it's quicker, I think, because you have to, than if it's
Right.
Bob in accounting, and you're like, hey, do a trust fall or something with Bob, and
Yeah, I will say, like, with the when I was a Team Eagle One, it was just a different level of humans where it was just they just wanted to better themselves. I mean, the fact was it was miserable for me, like absolutely miserable. And yet we all showed up and we all
Mhm.
put out and we all did the same thing. And yeah, there's this level of respect, there's this level of trust, there's this level of camaraderie that just naturally happens, when you go through something like that. And what do you ever I'm trying to think of, like, what is a way that could translate it to the civilian world in it, because it's not life or death. That's the thing. Like, it's just, and we don't think about it like that, because I mean, I work in the film business, and there's so many times where, like, think people go nuts, and I go, it's not open heart surgery. Like, no one's dying today. But then I realized when I went on the other side of it, it's like, no, but we're burning money. Like, that's a serious thing in terms of the amount of money that we're burning because of this. And then I'm realizing, because I have to put on both brains, the creative brain, which, thinks differently, and then the business brain, the producer hat, which thinks differently. So for yourself, like, is there anything in specific in terms of for a civilian to build that trust within the teammates?
Yeah, I mean, going out and doing something hard together or challenging together would be great. You can't always do that, but I've read or seen. I have some friends that work in like films, and when the cast, especially in a military movie, does like training together, they get some of that. Barring that, going out and just doing something, hard, a run or workouts. But I spend some time. I've started kind of transitioning into sharing some lessons with civilian companies and things like that, and having the opportunity to talk with groups. And the biggest thing that leads to trust is really comes down to something very unmarine like as vulnerability, kind of being like honest with people. If I was the director and you're in the case you brought up, hey guys, we really need to talk about this. I'm really worried about money. That's all of my decisions are made based on that. We want to make a good movie, yes, but I'm going to get fired and this movie's not going to get made if we don't come in under budget. So, having the ability to be vulnerable, and again, I would not say that that's a Marine Corps trait, but it's one I've slowly had to learn and realize that in civilian situations where you can't, like, hey, let's go get shot at and we'll be best buddies. Hopefully you can't do that. But what you can do is kind of learn to trust each other. Like, hey, man, I'm telling you something about myself or at least the way I see things, and you hopefully build an understanding.
So I'm curious now with what we're talking about in terms of, military life, civilian life. Was there a lesson from your military life that has been challenging to apply in civilian life?
One of the things, particularly because of the newsletter I write, like I think it's been approaching 3 years, like every week. So I've written a lot of them, and almost all of them I try to find something that I learned, a story or something, and translate that into civilian life. And I think in most cases I've been able to. So I don't think there's anything that I learned that's like not useful or functional. I've had to probably unlearn some impatience at times, and I had to recognize that, hey, and I spent most of my time either in some form of a special operations unit, so I was used to dealing with special operations people who were very much like me, who had kind of the same mentality, and were pretty like homogeneous. And I didn't have civilian friends, so I didn't really know any civilians. I lived on base for the most part, so other than my wife and my kids, and they had, especially my kids, had kind of grown up in this like vacuum of a military base, all around other special operations kids. So it was absolutely having to recognize that, hey, I'm dealing with, I don't want to make it sound bad, but like normal people. And you can't deal with normal people the way that you deal with our people.
Right. No, I mean, it's just different breed. It's different culture. It's different, a lifestyle. And I know that just for myself of growing up on Long Island. and then moving to Los Angeles and now moving to South Carolina, I'm just like, it's just different ball game. Like from where I'm from, like you show up, you say what you're gonna do, you say like you just that's just normal. I mean, you show up to 15 minutes before you're supposed to, in Los Angeles, they cancel 15 minutes before. In South Carolina, they don't even tell you. They just don't even show up. I'm just like, what? But it's just different, and you just kind of adapt and understand. And I still don't understand, but do my best. I'm new.
Yeah, I'm a 15 minutes early guy, so
Me too.
if you're
that's how I was bred.
Yeah, if you're 5 minutes early, you're 10 minutes late. Is my
yeah. No, you get that for sure. And I read in one of your newsletters, which I really was relating to, jack of all trades, because that's so me. And I remember I was in high school, and I remember I did so. My parents threw me in everything. They were just like, test everything out, do everything, and see what which way you're going to go. And it kind of like is still my thing. It's like podcasting, film, author, I'm all over the place. And I remember the guy was like, and I remember in high school, someone was like, oh, you're jack of all trades, master of none. And they forgot the next part of it.
Yeah.
And I was like, but there's a whole nother part that you're forgetting. That's what makes a jack of all trades so versatile. And I want to know, like, how do you balance being versatile, like the jack of all trades, while also for yourself, like, maintaining, I guess, mastery would be probably a better word in, like, I guess, like mission critical skills. Like you mentioned sniper, you went to dive school, like all that stuff.
In reconnaissance, the logo or the emblem or whatever is called a jack of all trades, or it's just usually called a jack. And guys get it tattooed, and it's like, jump wings, but a scuba diver over here, and there's a Pathfinder badge, and there's a knife, and there's all this stuff going on. Because we had such a varied mission set, that we had to be able to do all of these things, and you learn that you have to master it first. Then you can kind of let it not atrophy, but you can focus on something else, and then before a deployment, or certainly like before a mission, you'd say, hey, we're probably going to need to parachute. So we really need to, get out and practice this, make sure we know what we're doing, or dive, or do demolitions, or sniping, or whatever the case may be. So and I'm still that way. I'm kind of a frenetic, right? Newsletters. I have all these irons in the fire. I have a hard time kind of being still. Especially like as I start getting older, I'm like, I stop moving, I might die. I don't want to have that. And there's just so much, you kind of realize that, as you start to get older, that the amount of time you have left is starting to become less and less. And I have a lot that I want to accomplish. I'm kind of compelled, to do all of these different things, and I often find myself, not digging my corner, and jumping from thing to thing.
Do you feel like that's just like you've ran ultra marathons, creative writing, author, book, and all this other stuff that you got? Like, do you just keep finding just like hard things to push yourself like after your career? Were you doing any of this stuff like during your career, or were you thinking about what's next and things like that? Like, how do you keep finding it and to push yourself to keep accomplishing these things?
Yes, and I really did not care for running in the Marine Corps, and I didn't. I did it when we needed to, and I was fine at it. Like I said, I ran cross country and track in high school to prepare me.
Right.
I did not go out and just like, hey, I'm going to go for a run for fun. It was, if we did, it's like, hey, I'm going to go for a run because I need to stay in shape. After I retired, I realized, well, a couple of things happened. One, I was like, I need to find something to challenge myself. The other, and probably biggest driving factor, was that my son was starting high school, and I had convinced him to run cross country, and I was telling him like all my glory days and all the fun that I had. And so I'm like, hey, let's go out. We'll just go for like a 3-mile run. He was huffing and puffing, because he had never run that far. So I'm, hey, we're going to have a lot of work to do if you want to do this. But, I'm still feeling pretty good about myself. I'm like, yeah, I crush it. But within the span of about 2 weeks, he was like leaving me in the dust. And I'm like, man, this is, just unacceptable. I went to, I was at a Barnes and Noble, and I was looking for a book, on, how to train, people, kids for cross country. And I, found one and I got it, but I found this book that was sitting next to it. It was called Ultramarathon Man. And I had never heard of an ultra marathon. I'd never had a desire to run a marathon. I'd run one half marathon kind of on a bet in the Marine Corps. But I, started reading this book, bought it, took it home and just destroyed it. Realized, it was about this guy at 30 realizing that he was out of shape and he's going to start running ultramarathons. And he just happened to have whatever combination of genes and chromosomes that led to him being excellent at it. And he trained hard and everything else, obviously. But he actually just, his body didn't produce lactic acid the way that other people do. But at any rate, reading this book, I was like, if this guy can do that, then I can do it. Right. And I was, I needed something hard to do. So I found a 50-mile race online and, in Virginia, and signed up for it. And I had like 8 weeks to get ready. And that was that.
Wow. So how was that for you? Like in terms of, what, and how did you get through? Was there any moments where you're just like, oh my gosh, like, that's an ultra marathon. Then tell, that's what, is that 100 miles or something? Or
that one was 50. And then I started running increasingly longer ones after that. But I found, my time in the Marine Corps set me up for kind of success in that environment, because you need to have an ability to kind of shut your brain off for 24 hours while you're running through the woods. The first one I did not. I'm sure this was 2010, I think. So the internet existed, but there just was not a lot of information available, or I didn't know where to look. So as far as like training programs and things, it was totally on my own. So I was just like, hey, I'll go out and cover 30 miles on Saturday, and I'll stop at McDonald's and grab a hamburger and a Coke when I'm hungry, and I'll run as fast as I can. And then when I can't do that anymore, I'll walk. But I showed up at this race through the woods, and it's a very technical trail, and that's not what I had been accustomed to or been training on. But I take off with, and it's a rather large race, and it's kind of a single track trail, so that I had gotten myself up pretty close to the front because there's just no way to get out of the way. So I'm like, I've got to go fast. So I'm running faster and faster, make it through probably the first 20 miles, and it opens up, and I can kind of take it easy. But I ran into an old man who unbeknownst to me, had run this race many times and had won it, in its early days. So he gave me a lot of advice. He'd won like the first 3 or 4 times. He was like, hey, don't run up hills, that walk uphill, it doesn't make sense. And here's how you got to kind of think about eating and things like that, and taking in nutrients. And so I learned a ton from him. And one of the things that I found is that a lot of former special operations guys gravitate towards ultramarathons.
Yeah.
One, because of the challenge of it, obviously, but there's like a camaraderie in the suffering that I think we like. But there's also the other half of, there's a lot of the military or soft guys. There's a lot of like scientists and bankers and people with very, very weird jobs that you would not think. Especially scientists. There's a ton of kind of various types of scientists that, for whatever reason, love running ultramarathons because it's so different from what they do on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And then for us, it's because it's similar to what we did. So I got really into it for about 10 years, and I think I ran like 70 races during that time frame from, the coast of North Carolina. I ran that like 300 some odd miles, a handful of, 100 milers and longer races from Baton Rouge to New Orleans, 128 miles, just crazy races. And then around COVID time, I was kind of getting, it takes a lot of time, obviously, to train for, prepare, to travel the races and things like that. And so I don't think I've run one since probably 2020, about 5 years.
Wow. That's interesting, though. I didn't know any, don't run here, walk here, I just thought everyone just runs.
Yeah, it's very, very few people run for 100 miles, it's.
I was saying it's really challenging. I wanted to ask you. I should have asked it when I talked about the trust thing with the team and things like that. But um, before as this question popped in on, it's on leadership, and I'm really asking this one because I'm always curious in the leadership standpoint. Do you have a leadership mistake that you made in your career that reshaped how you lead?
Yeah, probably quite a few of them, but the one that pops into my mind, I think we were in Louisiana doing a training mission, and I was the platoon sergeant for this group. We were going to finish up everything that we're doing, and then we were going to go get on buses, drive down to New Orleans, and we are going to have a couple of days in New Orleans to hang out before we went back to California, where we were based. Had asked if the team leaders, I'm like, hey, are the weapons clean and everything? And they're like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Our commander later, came over and like just picked up somebody's weapon and it was filthy. And it was, a huge, like he just was disgusted with me. It was my responsibility. I'm, the guy in charge. So, I mean, one of the lessons that you learn in the Marine Corps is that if you're in charge of whatever happens or fails to happen. So it doesn't matter that, I asked and somebody told me, I failed to inspect, what I expected. And,
you had a newsletter on that.
did I? Okay.
Yeah, you talked about inspecting what you expect, and I wanted to ask you on that, like how. Because my question is then what you just said with that, like how can leaders apply that then without micromanaging everybody?
Yeah, it's tough. All right. It's kind of hard to do both of those things. The thing that I learned, and I learned this kind of in layers, I think later, when you're a young guy and your sergeant or corporal comes up and it's like, hey, we're getting ready to go out on patrol. I'm going to inspect you, right, to make sure you have all your stuff. Like you expect that, right? Because you're a young guy and you're stupid and you probably forgot something. So it's their job to make sure. But then as you start to get a little older, a little more senior, you've been around for a while, then you can start to resent the fact that somebody's like, why do you feel that you need to inspect me? Because, I'm a professional. I've got all my stuff ready. But then as you get a little, older than that or wiser, then you start to realize that, hey, man, will you come and inspect me? And I think that's what I was talking about in that newsletter, because you realize that, hey, two sets of eyes are better than one. The mission, this important mission is riding on me having my equipment ready and having all the stuff that I'm supposed to have. So you start to view being inspected as like you want it. That's something that you want.
Yeah.
And so I think the goal is, in leadership roles is to try to create that environment where like, I'm not trying to get you, I'm not trying to point out where you screwed up. I'm not trying to, it's not that I don't trust you, but hey, the things that we do are important. And, as a professional, we should be asking each other to double check our work.
And also I think it's good in terms of allowing just to check, make sure, hey, we got it right. Like we did it properly versus then all of a sudden there's an error down the line that becomes bigger because we didn't check it earlier.
Yeah.
Which we don't think about because sometimes we just want to leave people alone. But at the same time, I actually also want to ask you regarding one more article that what you talked about was premortem.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, unique approach. Can you share? Talk about that, and then can you share a specific mission or I guess like project or whatever, like something that where prevented failure?
Absolutely. So I've read about, I'm not sure where I read or heard that the term premortem, but in medicine, when a patient dies, they do a postmortem, and they like, hey, what happened? What screwed up? So the idea is that let's do that on the front end and say, hey, if something is going to go wrong, what's it going to be? What are the most likely culprits? And what can we do now to prevent those things from happening, when we're in the heat of the moment. So I like that term. In the military, we do it, but we do it a little bit differently. Usually we call it, and I think I've probably written a post called that too, but a red cell So we will take some of our guys, ask them to like assume the role of the enemy, and start looking at our plan from their perspective. Like, hey, what are the weaknesses in our plan? What are the places where things could fail? Where are the places where we're most vulnerable to attack? Normally, what comes out of that is the people who are performing that red cell role will say, hey, what happens if a vehicle breaks down here? If one of your vehicles breaks down here, you're going to be stranded on the road, and I'm, if I find you, I'm going to attack. Then, we'll go back and say, all right, well, let's, figure out how we're going to deal with this situation. If a vehicle goes down, how are we going to handle it? Are we going to leave the vehicle, blow it up, put everybody in other vehicles? And so that has contingencies to plans that have been developed because of red selling have absolutely been used in that sort of situation. Do we have like tow straps, to tow a down vehicle? And can we actually tow a 10-ton Humvee, through the middle of Baghdad? You can. It's while you're getting shot at, it's a little crazy, but it's in day-to-day life, I try to, just a quick, checklist. Like if I'm driving to Raleigh, North Carolina, if something happened, what's it going to be? Running out of gas, would be one. Wallet getting stolen, or not having an ATM card to get gas, whatever and they just, how can I got to mitigate those, those things. So I think it's a valuable tool for people to use kind of in whatever it is that you do.
Yeah, and before because we're coming on to the end of the show, and before I get to that final question, can you talk a little bit about your book?
Absolutely. It actually, I just discovered that today is the 1-year anniversary of it.
Congrats.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
my wife posted a memory from Facebook. So yeah, it's been out for a year. It's called Tough Rugged Bastards, and I think it's a little unusual of a war memoir. When I did get out, I decided to go to use the GI Bill that I had, and I wound up in a creative writing program, a master's program. Really learned a lot, about writing from an absolutely different perspective, and so I was able to kind of approach it, I think, and through a couple of lenses. I wanted to kind of, as you mentioned, a lot of times military people are very focused on, the full of acronyms and kind of, written for military people. I really wanted to write something that was pretty accessible to the non-military person, and I was writing it 18 or so years after most of the events happened. So it's, a lot of the books that have been written about the global war on terror were written pretty close to the events that so having time for reflection, certainly puts a different, I guess, spin on the book. But it was also, I wanted to write it because I was a part of this very unique kind of time in history when the Marine Corps was told, you don't want to, but you are required to form a special operations unit that's going to not answer to the Marine Corps, but answer to U.S. Special Operations Command. So we deployed as a SEAL platoon, essentially, with a SEAL headquarters above us, and we worked in Baghdad, like was said at the beginning, a pretty volatile time, capturing the deck of cards guys, or a lot of, some of them anyway. And a bunch of incredible Americans that were, Navy personnel that were with us, the Marines, and the families that were back home. So I wanted to kind of tell that story in a way to honor them.
This podcast episode is brought to you by Thrivers Coffee. Podcast guest Nick McKinley's company, Deliver Fund, brings you guys Thrivers Coffee. It is ethically sourced, it's organic, and it supports traffic survivors. That is right. Thrivers Coffee is all about empowering us to making a difference in the fight to end human trafficking. That's why 100% of the proceeds go directly towards their goal of bringing freedom to victims of human trafficking. So if you guys love coffee that is organic, ethically sourced, and tastes absolutely delicious, and want to help to end the fight of human trafficking, check out Nick McKinley's company, Thrivers Coffee. That is really, really interesting. I actually really love that. I'm considering it's going to happen because I'm considering it, just know myself. But I wanted to do a book club with some of our listeners, and each month we choose a new book because you guys have
Yeah.
a lot of my guests on the show have books, and they're awesome, and I read them, and I found them interesting, and I think that'd be really unique and different to do a little book club, and
Well,
your book sounds fun. Like it sounds like a good,
well, I think it is.
interesting
Most
read.
people seem to think so, but yeah, if you do one, I would be more than happy to come back on. And you know, I've had
Yeah,
yeah, I've been
definitely.
able
Yeah,
to do
that
that
sounds
a couple
great.
of places with, and it's interesting to kind of see what people get out of what you wrote, and obviously people pick up on different things and take different things different ways, but it's been really awesome to interact with people who've read it that I otherwise wouldn't have met, and to kind of hear their questions and
Yeah,
what
yeah.
they learned from it or got out of it.
Did you find, only because now I'm writing the memoir of training with a SEAL, and I find out I happen to vlog my experience while during that time, which I posted on YouTube, and I
Mm.
watch it all the time to recall certain things because I'm just like I in my mind,
Mm-hmm.
things are I don't remember or I do remember, and I just want to clarify. Now, was it challenging for you in terms of, like you said, it was like 18, 19 years later, or was it like I
Oh,
don't know, like did you find that challenging or like worried about,
hmm,
because I remember
yeah,
it
and
does change
I
over time.
talk about that kind of specifically in the book. My got a relationship with the truth, and if you're writing something that's true, it's a memoir. It's got to be true, but it also is true from
Mhm.
a couple of lenses. It's true from what I remember. It's true from what I remembered at that time, and then there's the inevitable changes that occur over years. So in certain points I was able to go kind of to history and like double check my facts. In some cases I went to people who were there, but in some cases I'm like, hey, here's what I remember. Other people might remember it differently, or but I spend a good bit of, and I think it's part of the one of the things that makes it a little unique is it's I kind of dive into that. I'm like, here's and the Marine Corps, like I said, the Marine Corps relationship with truth is not the best. The Marine Corps makes up a lot of stuff, so I talk about that hey, I was kind of
I
brought up
like that. That's awesome.
in a
Yeah.
culture that with the motto that don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. So
Good story. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I like that. I like that. Yeah, definitely gonna give that a read. As I develop this book club, keep you posted. And my final question then for you on the show is, what do you have for us, listeners on the show, that we could do on a daily basis to develop our mental fitness to tackle those everyday challenges that inevitably come our way?
Yeah, I think one of the easiest ways is to just every day do something that you don't want to do, and it doesn't, if it's I'm not one of those people that like, hey, you have to have a cold plunge in the morning and then a sauna, and I don't have
Yeah.
time for all that. I wish I did. But, just turning the shower on to cold for 15 seconds, just doing something that's like, I don't want to do this thing, but I'm going to do it anyway. If you can do that, then you can do something that's a little harder. I'm a big believer in a huge believer in goal setting and just picking something that you want to achieve. And if you're not kind of constantly on the hunt or the searching for something, then you're kind of what are you doing? You're kind of stagnant, right? So find what is run a 5K, sign up for it and make yourself get out there and do it, or jump in the ocean or whatever it is. One of the best ways I've found anyway to build mental toughness is to do things that you don't have to do and don't want to do. And if you can do that just a little bit each day, then you'll, even the cold shower, you'll like, that wasn't so bad today. It wasn't as bad as it was 3 or 4 days ago. And if I can do that, then maybe I can haul my ass into the gym and get a workout in.
Yeah, and I find that too, like, because I find myself sometimes like putting off a difficult conversation that I need to have, or running a nonprofit. You're always like, I mean, even as in your bit in my business, it's always sales and asking for things and talking to people, and and the more and more you do it, the more and more you build that resilience for being able to have that just be more not putting off those difficult conversations. You're ready to have them because you've done it before, and you're like, okay, I survived. It wasn't that bad. Okay, I got through it. Yeah, it was challenging. And I just think like little things like that too help you with building that mental fitness and resilience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for being on the show. You were amazing.
Thank you very much. It's been a great time.
Everyone that's listening, please like, share, comment, subscribe, become a Substack member for the extra goodies that only our Substack members get. And also, I want to hear from you guys. Do you like this book club idea that I am considering? Let me know. You can email me at mindsetlessonsfromthefield@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you guys and hear what you guys think of the show. And thank you so much. I will see you guys all next Wednesday.